The ANC is reviewing its 2021 local government elections manifesto, looking at progress, challenges, lessons ahead of the 2026 elections. Let's unpack the party's assessment so far and what it means for the upcoming polls. We're joined on the line, in fact, by via video link by ANC NEC member Dr Dickson Masemola. Doc, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. Perhaps we start with, why the review now?
Well, good evening to you and to all the viewers throughout the country. It is true that the National Executive Committee of the ANC has concluded the performance review of our local government system, basically to inform the preparations towards the 4th of November 2026, to check and assess the extent to which we would have been able to implement the 2021 manifesto and areas of need and how best, where there's a need to do a proper adjustment. That assessment report basically informs us of the work done so far. And therefore, we are quite very, positioned, firstly, appreciating what the record speaks for themselves, the access and expansion of services, water, electricity, and sanitation to a very higher percentage, but not necessarily withstanding the fact that the current experiences of South Africans could be pointing to a different direction, and therefore noting those matters. This assessment report basically gives us that opportunity to reset the system, to re-engineer the administrative systems of our municipalities and politically position the movement for the upcoming municipal elections.
I'm going to get to resetting in just a moment, but there's something that your statement says, which you've touched on a little bit, to say the people encounter the municipality through water, sanitation, electricity, roads, refuse removal, public spaces, planning approvals, rates, accounts, and the conduct of councillors and officials. In a city like Joburg, would you say that people have had a good encounter?
The Johannesburg situation is a very, unique political situation which electorally could not only be attributed to the African National Congress. The ANC has not been in charge of the city since 2016. And to the extent that other parties were unable to basically live up to the constitutional mandate in terms of Section 152 of the Constitution. And now that the ANC is actually managing this city through a coalition, the problems of Johannesburg and elsewhere where there are coalition politics is because of the dynamics of a power play through this coalition difficulties. It's a very fragile arrangement. It's a very difficult process to manage, and therefore everything cannot be attributed to the ANC. And that is part of what the assessment has been able to show us, that we've got to be able to go back to South Africans and ask them to give us a mandate in many cities of the country, including Johannesburg and many other rural municipalities, so that the plan that we have that talks to the strengthening of leadership, the sharpening of the leadership instruments, the bettering of the institutional arrangements around professionalization, the resetting of the model around the redesign, and as well as the structural adjustment. And how do we deal with matters of positioning communities themselves through relational governance, so that they become the actual primary arbiters of this democracy, because they are actually given that responsibility by the Constitution. So very importantly, is taking note of the assessment report and what it says. The ANC says to South Africans through what I'm communicating tonight here, that largely the review of the local government white paper talks to the grounding of this process. Firstly, in many parts of the country, we are cementing our relations with traditional leaders through what will become a very sorry.
Pardon me, Doc. Pardon me for coming in there. You do have, though, a resident, for example, who'll be in Kliptown, a resident who'll be in Alex, who'll tell you that, they do not accept the explanation that largely it hasn't been, everything can't be attributed to the ANC. park the time when there was the Democratic Alliance before then, there would have been a number of ANC mayors who would have led the city of Johannesburg. Alexander's still the way it is. There would have been ANC mayors who would have led the city of Johannesburg, with Kliptown being the way it is. I come from Soweto, for example, have seen a lack of development for quite some time. And a resident would say to you, it isn't totally true to say that largely you cannot be blamed as a party for some of what we see.
What I was saying is that the assessment reports points to the milestones that we have been able to record. And I was able to qualify myself that notwithstanding inherent related constraints and probably experiences of South Africans, I was responding to the question that you were actually raising about Johannesburg and contextually trying to put records straight. But broadly and generally so, to the extent that we have been able to do this assessment, we appreciate the living experiences of South Africans on a day-to-day basis. But most importantly, is not for us to lament those issues as a responsible organization. Where things might have not gone quite well, we accept and acknowledge those limitations. And therefore, where things were done not correctly so, not necessarily because of our presence, but because of the party political dynamics of multi-party democracies in those local jurisdictions. The ANC, because it's the national organization that prides itself of its history and therefore where we are at the moment, we are humbling ourselves before South Africans on how best we can work together with them to correct those issues. Let me just give you a very high level a policy and structural and a plan that we have. Firstly, I said we are responding to the need to strengthen leadership in the coming municipal administration. We're setting standards, we're setting limits, we're setting a very clear framework of who should qualify as a cadreship to be deployed through our political system, which is very clear and unambiguous about those standards. So we're not really lamenting that issue. The second point, we are very clear about what could have been a mishap between what I would call a characterization of a will and as well as the ability, the capacity and as well as the responsibility. And to the extent that we have learned those matters, professionalization is what we're putting forward to South Africans with a very clear understanding that merits-based appointment based on skills, capacity, education, based on a proper selection and recruitment process is what we're putting forward to South Africans. We're putting to South Africans a review of the funding model to address what could have been a limitation from a policy point of view of funding proportions, which is not very adequate. We're actually far advanced with regard to that process so that enough resources could be made available to come and work on with our communities to better their living conditions.
Quickly in a nutshell, before I let you go, why should South Africans trust you? I'm sure this is a question you're going to be hearing on the campaign trail for quite some time, to say that you've been given chances over and over again, and there's a likelihood of another coalition arrangement when it comes to a number of municipalities. And you will then face the question, why should South Africans trust your deployees?
We are asking South Africans to give the ANC an opportunity and a chance to basically take forward the actual consolidation of what we have been able to achieve over electoral period of time, but most importantly, the plan that is based on what is well articulated based on our theme at the moment within the manifesto. We remain a responsible organization. We are humbling ourselves before South Africans because we are not lamenting. We are not disregarding their general concerns. We appreciate the extent to which they might have been, disappointed here and there about their general experiences on a daily life. And therefore, comprehensively, the African National Congress, as I was explaining, that massive comprehensive plan that talks to almost every aspect of what could be a problem and a constraint, a challenge on the side of South Africans. We want them to ensure a proper alignment between our national objectives, provinces, including the extent to which those matters will find expression on the ground. Because if there is that disconnect, of course, so understandably within the confines of what the Constitution talks about, but it's very important that South Africans, find it very comfortable in their hearts to basically, once again, give us that opportunity to work with them, because it's not only about us. This ANC belongs to them. ANC is their instrument.
All right.
It belongs to them. It is owned by them. We are just managing its affairs as individual and collectives elected in conferences. But basically, we are an instrument that the people of this country have at their disposal to advance the social transformation.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. ANC NEC member Dr. Dickson Masemola there speaking to us about the party's review of the 2021 local government elections manifesto.